Hey guys, Churchy here. So I've played about 55 hours of Last Epoch 1.0 and previously I played about 20 hours in an earlier build of the game. I'm having a blast with 1.0 and in this video I just kind of want to share some of my thoughts about Last Epoch and just sort of talk through some of its features and things that I like about the game. So let's jump straight into it. So the campaign is okay. You basically just go through some different regions on the map, end up like doing little different linked sections of areas and stuff, running through some quests. You unlock some passive point rewards and some idle slots. Idle slots is these things, idols go in there. We'll talk more about that a bit later. There's also some nice skips in it, like later on if you want to skip to different parts more quickly on another character, you can actually do that because you can go through certain dungeons and then they'll basically, like this one, Soulfire Bastion, they'll basically give you like a way out to a different part where you can sort of skip through little bits of the, well, certain sections of the content. And on top of that, once you reach the end of time, that's where you can unlock your mastery. And then you can just start doing the Monolith, which is one of the endgame systems. And you can do that from really early on if you want to. And then kind of go back and forth between doing some campaign and doing some Monolith, which is pretty cool. It's nice that they've got some features in place to kind of let you skip the campaign, a lot of the campaign on your next character once you've done stuff with one character, basically. You do need some dungeon keys to do it, like some of the skips, which is just these guys. There's like different dungeons, which we will also talk about later, but basically you can do some skips. One thing I will say is the world map UI, like all this stuff, it's it's not the best, a little bit average. But to be honest, you don't really end up using this very much once you're kind of in the endgame Monolith system doing Monolith. You're not really going to be worrying about the world map UI because you're mostly in the Monolith, and then when you click on the Monolith, the UI you'll mostly be using is this, where you're just clicking on a node and doing a node you want to do. But again, we'll talk more about that later. The mini map, very nice, clear overlay map. Same thing again, it's very clear. I mean, bit of a poor example here, but yeah, you can see it's very nice. You can play with the transparency and stuff in the settings. I believe it's on the gameplay. Yep, overlay map. You can change the zoom, the opacity, so that's all quite good. What I do really like about this game, it sits in a nice level of complexity. It's kind of somewhere in between Diablo and Path of Exile, let's say, with Diablo being the more casual end and then Path of Exile being the more crazy complex end. In Last Epoch, there's a lot of systems that are just straightforward, easy to understand and use, and just lots of nice quality of life features. I also appreciate that there's no XP penalty on death in Last Epoch, which is very nice. That can be, it's in PoE, that can feel quite bad in PoE sometimes for a bunch of reasons that I won't go into in this video. Next, let's show off the stash. I do really like the stash system in this. You basically have like your tabs and everything, and you can purchase more and more. I think you can purchase up to like 200. You purchase these with in-game gold. So there's no microtransaction for this. And then you can like customize the tabs and choose what colors, give them an icon, choose a name for them. So you can see here I've got like lots of exalted tabs because that's something you'll farm up a lot of. Experimental, idols, makes me want to build. Some cool items in there. But basically, yeah, you can set up your stash however you want. Mine's a bit of a mess, but whatever. Yeah, there's different item types and item tiers and stuff. So, you've got your normal base items. All items usually have like an implicit on them. Then you got like your magic items, and the base items have no affixes. Magic items can have 1 to 2 affixes. Rares can have up to 4. And then you've got your Exalted, which will have a tier 6 or a tier 7, and they can roll multiple tier 6s or tier 7s, or like, I think you can, if you got crazy lucky, it would be super rare, but you could roll like 3 or 4 even. I think, I'm not 100% on that, but I know they can roll at least 2. And the tier 6 and up, like tier 6 and tier 7 are really, really powerful. Then you got like your uniques. Some of these are really cool. Some of them are a bit lackluster. Some of them are kind of really good once you do some crafting thing. Basically, once you turn them into a legendary by smashing a unique and an exalted item together of the same type, so ignore that. But you can do that at the Temporal Sanctum later on, which I will get into. But then you can make some really powerful ones sometimes. And then there's set items. A lot of the set items kind of feel pretty underwhelming, to be honest. This one's kind of cool. I like the look of this. But yeah, there's a lot of them that you're just kind of like, wow, it's not much point using this. Maybe early on they might be useful for a little bit, but yeah. And then, of course, all this gear and stuff, you're basically trying to build your stats. And yeah, this is basically just the stats window. You got your resistances and stuff, your armor and your dodge and your ward, which is kind of like energy shield, basically, from like PoE or something. Stun avoidance, different damage types. You can see the different ones I've been buffing. Again, I'll talk more about that later. Different defenses, some minion stuff, and some other bonuses. That's basically the stats page. You know, your attributes up here, and you can hover over things and it shows you what they do, which is nice. It kind of makes it quite easy to just look at whatever you need to look at. The crafting, that's a big thing in this game, which I really, really like, is the crafting. So let's kind of talk about that. So basically, you'll find different items with different affixes. Sometimes you want to save them for later, to craft on them later, or you want to salvage them basically to get different shards. And then you'll kind of find yourself rotating gear occasionally to kind of cover different weaknesses that you might have when you equip a different item. But basically, you've got your items, you've got your crafting window. I'll just grab out a few different things. I might just go to this tab and boom, 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 boom. And you can't craft on uniques or set items, but you can do that thing I talked about briefly, which is the combining a unique and a exalted item of the same type at the Temporal Sanctum, at the Eternity Cache. But we'll talk about that later. So basically, you got your forging window. You can put a thing in here. It has forging potential, and that's how much, basically, how much you can craft on an item. Different things will use different amounts of forging potential. You might get really lucky and not use any. There's this, which helps that, basically, because it usually will always use some, but it can vary a lot how much it uses. This Glyph of Hope, I will talk more about the glyphs in a minute, but this one's really nice because there's a 25% chance that it'll have no forging potential cost. And then basically, if I click this, I'll be able to show you. You've got this, we'll talk about all this. I might quickly just chuck this item in there to show a better kind of representation, but basically you've got your 4 affixes. Items can have up to 4 affixes. You've got your prefixes, your suffixes, and then of course it also has the implicit mods on the item, which are, yeah, like you can see up the top there, 83 to armor, 11% increased cast speed, 21 increased mana regen. Now these different ones you can craft up to tier 5, T6, T7, they're the ones that can roll on the exalted items. So I will just grab out a tier 7 just to show you quickly how crazy some of these mods can be. As you can see there, 341% increased damage over time. It's that purple one up the top there. That's the exalted mod. Basically, exalted mods, super powerful, super nice. But yeah, you pretty much craft on items, and you've got your, as I said, prefixes, suffixes, and you can kind of scroll down and see what things you could potentially get. If there was a free slot, then you can add something to it. So I put these boots back in for a second. I can click here and it'll show me what I can apply to that slot. That's the prefix. If I click over here, then I can add a suffix. So available to be applied. And these are all the different things you can apply to it. And these are the shards. Shards are what you get for, basically, if you've got an item and you salvage the item, then you can, or shatter the item rather, then you can basically get some of these back. I'll talk about that now. Basically, you've got your glyphs and runes, which can do different things, right? Now, glyphs, Rune of Shattering, that will destroy the item, creates a random number of affixes, basically up to whatever tier the affix was. So you might get 3 of these, 1 of these, 2 of these, 1 of these, or you might get like 5 of these if you're lucky. Rune of Refinement, that re-rolls the values of the actual affix. That can be kind of useful later on. Rune of Removal, this one basically removes 1 affix and gives you all of the shards equal to its tier. This can be really good if you've got like an item with not many affixes on it, but it's got a really high tier one that you really want. Or it can also be good, say this is another kind of crafting thing, but if you have an item that's got like all tiers of things that you really like, but then it happens to have like a tier 5 thing that you can't get rid of, you might use a Rune of Removal to try and get lucky. And so say I wanted to get rid of this spell damage for curses, because I can't craft that anymore, but I like everything else that's on it. I might try and use a Rune of Removal, and then I can also use a Glyph of Hope in combination with that to hopefully not spend Forging Potential removing it. Then I'd click Remove an Affix, it'll choose a random one, and we actually got the Vitality, so that's all right. So let's just pretend the Vitality was what we wanted to remove. Now we can put another prefix on it, so we can go back into our menu here, and whatever random thing we wanted to add, we can add. So let's just say we wanted to do Intelligence. Then I can put in an Intelligence shard. Usually you want to have Glyph of Hope equipped as much as you can, and then I can do Add Affix. And now I've added the Intelligence, and I can choose to upgrade that and try and get it up and up and up. But then let's talk more about this. You've also got Rune of Discovery. If there's a bunch of empty affixes, that one will basically add an affix to all of them at random. It's got an increased chance of rolling rarer affixes. Rune of Shaping, that one's kind of nice. Very occasionally you might have, because it re-rolls the implicits on an item. So if I hold this down, see how you can see there, the implicits on this, it can roll a range of 49 to 49 armor, so that's fine. It can roll 7 to 41 necrotic res. So I might want to re-roll that implicit. Sometimes it can be really useful, especially later on if you've got a really nice item but it rolled crappy on the implicits. Then you can try and shape it. Same thing again, try not to spend the forging potentials. Though this one, I can't remember how much it uses, but not much, if any. But basically, yeah, it's re-rolled the necrotic res. Can be useful. Rune of Ascendance is really cool. Can upgrade any item of the same type to a unique of that item type, or a set item of that item type. That can be kind of cool. Rune of Creation, really, really rare. That can duplicate an item. So that can be really, really handy if you're basically trying to make legendary items by combining like at the Eternity Cache, by combining an Exalted and a Legendary. You can have like multiple Legendary bases with the Legendary potential, which we'll talk about, but basically you can use the Rune of Creation to duplicate an Exalted item that has really good rolls that you might want to try and use multiple times or something to try and get the best result. But we will go into that a bit more later. But basically, that's Rune of Creation. And then Rune of Research, basically there are experimental items in the game as well, and experimental items have like unique experimental affixes, but basically you can use a Rune of Research to seal an experimental affix on the item, and that moves it to its own slot and then lets you use that slot that it's in. So I could move that to its own slot and then have put another affix in where that was. And in this case, it's the experimental 11% of my armor mitigation will also apply to damage over time, plus 49 armor. So that's kind of cool, because if you get a really nice experimental affix and it's got really good other stats and things, then you can make it even more powerful because you can add an extra affix. So that's pretty cool. And that's all the glyphs. The runes, basically, show you on this item again. Another really cool one that you'll use a lot is Glyph of Chaos. Say you've rolled an item that has all the things you want, but it's got one thing that you don't want, then you can use a Glyph of Chaos to basically roll that into another random affix of the type it can be. So in this case, a prefix. So I use a Glyph of Chaos. That's going to re-roll that into some random prefix. Upgrade re-roll, so I got minion health. So maybe that's what I was really, really looking for. and that can be really, really handy. And you can do that up to tier 5. So you might not want minion health, so I can go again, upgrade. Hey, I got dexterity, I got a critical success. That's something that can be really cool. You can get critical successes when you're doing crafts, which can raise it by a tier for free, basically. So now it's got a bunch of dex on it. One bad thing, every once in a while, a crit will actually screw you over because you might have been trying to just like roll that into something else and you didn't want dex, and if that had critted and gone up to 5, so say I did like 3 and went up to 4 but it crits to 5 or whatever. Basically there's instances, they're pretty rare, but there's the occasional time where it will brick an item for you by getting a critical success because you didn't actually want the stat, but it's gone up to 5 and it's locked it from being crafted, so then you'd have to try and rune of removal it. Other glyphs, you've got Glyph of Order. I don't think I've ever actually used one of these. But again, that's the more fiddly crafting stuff for later. And then you've got Glyph of Despair. Again, it's basically a more powerful like sealing rune thing, because instead of just being an experimental affix, Glyph of Despair can basically do that to a normal affix, so you can potentially end up with like a 5 affix item. Very powerful. And then there's this other one which I don't even know what it is because I've never even seen it, but basically that's the glyphs, the runes, affixes, prefixes, suffixes, experimental items, other random items, exalted items, uniques. But yeah, so legendary potential, again, we've sort of talked about it, but there's, items that'll have legendary potential, and then you can basically combine them with an exalted item, and depending on the amount of legendary potential that they have, that'll do. So basically that's got 1 legendary potential. Here's an exalted item with 4 affixes. The exalted item that you combine with the unique item has to have 4 affixes, and the legendary potential is how many of those affixes it'll take onto the item. So there are some really rare uniques with 4 legendary potential, which means it would take every single affix on this item, but usually it's much more common that you'll have like 1 or 2. But then basically you slam them together at the Eternity Cache after you complete the Temporal Sanctum dungeon, and then the unique item will take, as I said, however many legendary potential, that's how many affixes it'll take off this. And it's at random, so you might be really wanting that 3 to reperform plus 62 health. But in this case, it's 25% chance that it'll get it, because that's only got 1 legendary potential. So you combine those and then you see what you get.
Then I can't seem to recall. No matter.
Yeah, okay. What was that, 40? Let's go. And what do we get? Nice necrotic res, which is not bad. Another really neat thing is Weaver's Will, which is basically, here we go. So Weaver's Will is like, oh no, that's legendary potential. Why did it show me that? Oh, here we go, Weaver's Will. Weaver's Will is really cool. It's another way to basically get a legendary item. That's what I did with this one, which I actually got quite lucky with, because I had like 3 of them appear basically, and they all had Weaver's Will. They were from a prophecy, which was from a Circle of Fortune thing, which is an item faction thing, which again I'll talk about later in the video. But this was a really cool thing that happened, because basically I had 3 different ones to play with, and in the end I ended up using this one because I quite like this. So Weaver's Will, there'll be a number, I think it's like 6 to 20 or something, but basically the item, you equip it, you start killing things, and the Weaver's Will start rolling, and it either adds a new affix or upgrades an affix. So in this case, it ended up adding some, upgrading some, and then in the end, once I'd used it all, I had 3 different affixes, which is the increased cast speed, the physical resistance, and the health, and it upgraded them to various tiers. So in this case, I've got a tier 2 cast speed, a tier 4 physical res, and a tier 6 extra health, which is quite nice. And then it's got the base things that were already on the unique item, which is the +1 to acolyte skills, plus 12% endurance, and when a nearby enemy or ally dies, you gain ward equal to 2 to 4% of its maximum health, 2-second cooldown. So that's quite cool. But yeah, so that's another cool way to basically get really powerful items. This one was one that I actually did the slamming the items together at the Eternity Cache, an exalted item and the unique ring, which was Jorah's Star Dial. Pretty cool item. The necrotic res was alright. I think there was something else that I was going for at the time that would have been way better, but yeah, that's basically that. Now, as far as combining gear and stuff and just getting your resistances and your damage up and everything, that's another thing that can feel pretty cool in this game. Often what ends up happening is you'll kind of have like a few items in reserve, I found, that you kind of want to, well, at least I like to. It feels nice to have items in reserve so you can kind of mix and match what resistances you're going for and stuff, while also keeping your damage up. Because you might have like something like this, that instead of cold res, it has all the other similar stats, but it might have like lightning res instead of that cold res at the bottom there. So it can be nice, depending what you're kind of upgrading and going for. It can be nice to have those options to mix and match. The other layers that kind of come into that is basically the idols and blessings. So idols are basically little items that you can get, which have a couple of bonuses. Some are class specific, like this is a class specific one that I really like because it adds ward when I use Profane Veil, which lets me basically like, and it gives me 52 health, but the ward per second basically lets me like build up some protection while I'm using my Profane Veil, which is this ability, and then I basically just click this and you can see my ward just climbing up. And that can be really nice, adds some nice survivability and all of that jazz. But basically, yeah, there's a lot that I've ended up using that it's just like giving me health and resistance to something. Yeah, like 3% increased health, plus 7 elemental res. What's really nice with idols, as you collect up a bunch of them, and especially if you're like target farming for certain ones and only picking up certain ones, I could be like, I need more, and in this case, I've done it before, I've needed more physical res or cold res, but I might be like, I need more lightning res. So I can type in lightning res on the stash filter, and then here we go. I'm seeing all the ones that will give me any lightning res, and then I can just kind of go through and look at the ones that I want. So I'm like, oh yeah, 6 mana, 7 lightning res, stun avoidance, lightning res, armor, lightning res, ward on potion use. And then, yeah, you can just kind of look through. There we go. That's like another really nice one. 5% increased health, 4% elemental res. Ward retention is also good because that's how long it takes for your energy shield thing to drain back down to its threshold. But yeah, basically it's this. You can kind of look through, or I might be like, I really need some necrotic res. So I can look through and see which ones I have. Damage over time, necrotic res, damage over time, necrotic res, stun chance, necrotic res. You get the point. It can be really nice. Once you've built up a bunch of different ones with different resistances and different little bonuses, you can kind of mix and match to fill out. If there's like a little gap here, like say you've got something that's like sitting at 60% or 70%, you might be like, oh, I'll just pop in one idol that will get that up to 75%. On top of that too is the other layer, which is the blessings. You can get some blessings from some of the timelines that will give you different resistances. Like here, I'm actually using one, so that's a perfect example. I have one at the moment that's giving me 57% lightning res. I might end up swapping that out, but the point is that the blessings that you can get from completing the monoliths, the timelines in the monolith, they basically can be really, really powerful and can help you fill out gaps that your character might have. So yeah, that's really, really cool. And I love that feeling of combining different stages of like gear, idols, blessings to kind of fill out your character, and whether it's damage or resistances or whatever you're going for, just filling all those out and getting them working in tandem feels really nice. The other really cool thing is when you find an item that just makes you want to build something, makes you want to make like another character. Ignore that. That was just I needed extra storage. But these two in particular are some examples of that. This one I don't know, I want to make some kind of lightning physical character because I just think this turned out really, really cool. And I probably will eventually and see how it actually holds up. And then this one was fun too because it was just like, I just happened to be in the Sanctum thing, needed to do this thing, tried to get something on it, got the one I wanted and thought, hey, that's kind of cool too. And then another one that I kind of quite like is this guy. That adds like a ton of skills to my character. It does some cool stuff to one of the abilities that I've been using a lot. And again, it's just like another fun moment of like, oh wow, I could probably like build around this item and play with this item, and it's got 1 legendary potential, so there's potential there to upgrade it even more. So it's just kind of, again, another cool item that makes me go, hey, I want to make a build with this or do something with this. So that's always a good feeling in these games. Another really cool thing, which I will quickly mention, is there's actually a guide built into the game. So if there's something you need to know about, so in my case, I remember I needed to know what frailty did. So I can just type in that, look that up, and it shows me exactly what that's doing. And then you can also click here as well, and it will tell you like what things are doing. I did have an amulet that was giving me a chance to do frailty. I think it's this one. Yeah, chance to apply frailty. If you hold like Alt, you can see stuff. Control plus Alt will show you the tiers of affixes. Just holding Alt will give you the information. So frailty reduces damage dealt. But yeah, if you just on the fly need to look up something, you can just click G, bring up the guide, look up what you're want to look at, and it'll tell you some information about it. And that can be really, really handy. There's a few times where it's been really useful. The other really cool thing I want to talk about is the item filter, the loot filter. Shift F, bring that up. Oh yeah, and before when I was bringing up the Forge menu, that's just F. I for inventory, all the standards. C for character sheet. Shift F brings up the loot filter. And when I started, I've just now called it cluster effect filter. I was just experimenting and playing around and seeing like how it worked. And over time, I added more and more crap to it as I was leveling up. And then I made like a more endgame focused one that basically suits my needs much better now. But basically with the loot filter, you can go in and you can customize it and specify certain rules and give level ranges to rules and stuff if you really want to. You can do like a character level dependency. But basically this is a simple one. It's just hiding all normal, magic, and rare items. So that can be good later on when you just want to hide all of that and then only show specific things. And then I'm hiding idols and experimental stuff, except for specific ones that I want to show up. So then I've got like show warlock idols, show warlock experimental, which was just some things that worked well for what I was doing. Recolor level 80 plus gear. This was just recoloring anything that was above level 80 because at the time I wanted to just get some of those bases to play around with. Recolor items with certain numbers of affixes. Now this something is interesting. So I'll just confirm. Basically, with this, what this is saying is there's 52 affixes I've selected, different things, cast speed, spell damage, damage types, etc. And then I'm saying if an item has at least 2 of these affixes, I want to see it. But I'm also saying the total affix tiers, I want it to be more or equal to 10. So what that means is if I chuck an item in here, I should use the other one, but right there, 5 plus 5, that's 10. In this case, 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2, so 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So then that would possibly show up on my bigger tier. So see, that one's the same thing, but it's like a sum of 14. But that's 2, but then it might even be emphasized yellow. We'll see what that does. In this case, it's gone orange because the other thing I've done in this filter, but basically all these ones are just showing me items with different affixes that I like of different tiers and with different amounts. And then these ones are a bit different because this one is basically recoloring if it's got any class affix that I like. So I've got all these affixes of different class stuff. So then I can, in this case, it's the spell damage for curses. And these ones is basically same thing again. It's just showing But these ones are exalted items, but again, it's showing specific exalted. But this one's a bit different because I'm just saying 55 of these affixes, if at least one of these affixes is on the item, but the item tier is more or equal to 6, it could just be equal, but basically if it's tier 6, which means it's going to be exalted anyway because exalted starts at tier 6, then I want to show it. I want to emphasize it if it's got 2 of them, which is kind of rare because that's basically a double, it's a double exalted pretty much. And then this is basically saying if there's any tier 7s, same thing again. If it's 1 tier 7 affix, color it to that. If it's 2, emphasize the color. And then these ones is basically just the green are just coded more towards like defensive affixes that I really wanted, and then the red is basically like offensive affixes that I really wanted to get. And the same thing again with the tier 7 stuff. So it's just, these are like the big boy items. If I see that color drop, I know I really want to get it. If I see these colors dropping, then I know I want to pick it up for later for crafting or like shattering or whatever. But I will quickly as well just show you a shatter because I don't think I actually shattered an item. So we'll just shatter this guy. Bam. And then I get some tiers, some stuff. Probably cut that in somewhere. So yeah, that's the loot filters in-game guide and everything. I love all of that stuff. Item factions. This is a really interesting concept, which I will explain now. But basically, you can choose an item faction once you get to like Act 9, I think, in the campaign stuff, which doesn't really take that long. It's not as long as like Path of Exile or anything. But you can choose either the Circle of Fortune or the Merchant's Guild, and then you've got the Observatory and the Bazaar. Now, you build favor basically by killing enemies, completing quests. Then you spend it with to do things in your faction, but then that gains you reputation with your faction, and then your reputation is your experience in the faction. And it looks like a small amount of reputation is gained while slaying enemies and completing quests as well. But you get big chunks if you're actually spending your favor within the faction. The Merchant's Guild, I haven't actually played with it yet, but already, you can spend favor to sell items on the bazaar, and then other players can buy the items, and then as you unlock ranks, you can basically trade higher tiers of gear. So you can see here, you can sell basic items, then buy set items, buy specific unique items, buy idols, buy exalted weapons, buy unique weapons. So then you can pretty much, so you can sell all the items, but as you progress the ranks in this, you can just buy better and better gear. And to be honest, I think that's, the Merchant Guild is pretty much the one that, if you want to play really efficiently and just easily be able to acquire the best stuff, I would say the Merchant's Guild is the way to go, because even with all the benefits of that the Circle of Fortune offers, it's never going to be able to compete with just the sheer number of people listing items for sale through the Merchant's Guild. That said though, the Circle of Fortune does offer some pretty interesting stuff, and if you want to kind of just play solo and just go through at your own pace and play around, then I've quite enjoyed the Circle of Fortune, and I've just been playing solo and it's worked fine for me. This basically, you have the ranks give you just a lot of different benefits related to like looting different items and different things like that. So, as you get further along, they get better and better. Affixes are 50% more likely to be exalted, 35% chance for double rewards from Monolith echoes, which we'll get into. Uniques are twice as likely to have legendary potential. That can be super handy for, like we talked about, crafting earlier, when you want to make a legendary item by combining a unique and an exalted item. Basically, I'll go to the observatory and I'll explain some of this stuff. Right, so here we are at the observatory, and you basically got this merchant, and she's someone that sells like certain item bases, but you can buy these for favor. So there's my favor there, and I can buy that, and then that will probably give me a little bit of reputation. But also you can buy lenses from her, which you then put into telescopes to basically achieve certain effects that you want to do. And then you've got your telescopes up here, and there's different ones for different types of things. So idle prophecies, And then you can see here, these is basically like glyphs and rewards like that, and idols, runes, keys, glyphs, idols. And I've put lenses in here that you can see. And basically, the lens I've put in, if it would show me, it's been a bit weird. 15% increased chance per rank to find runes. So what that means is then when I roll the prophecies in here, there's a bigger chance that it's going to have prophecies with runes. And you can re-roll the prophecies if you don't like what's there. But I might just click this one, and then once you select one and you choose it, it re-rolls the prophecies that are there. So I've acquired the prophecy, and basically the prophecies have a condition. It's like an event. It's got a condition applied to that event, and then the reward that you'll get once that's completed. So in this case, it wants me to kill 6 void horrors. The condition is that I do that in the monolith, and the reward I get is 8 runes of shattering. So why not? Let's just pick that one up. Although I should probably have a quick look. What else is there? Blah, blah, blah. You get the point. I'll just choose that one. But yeah, so that's like runes and whatnot. Then you've got like accessories. So, you know, you've got your like relics and your rings and your amulets and stuff. Death of rare enemy, any dungeon, 3 unique rings, easy. I'll pick that one. And as I'm doing this favor, like spending this favor, I'm gaining reputation with the Circle of Fortune. You can see I'm getting closer and closer to get it, unlocking tiers like the 7th level with the tier 7 affix chance. But yeah, as well as the accessories and the idols and resource like glyphs and runes, you've got your weapon prophecies and your armor prophecies. So say you're chasing a certain type of armor. In this case, I've got these ones in. Oh, that one I can't get out because I put it in, but you unlock different lens, basically slots as you level up your reputation with the circle. But that one I put in earlier and it just went in, but I can't get it out. I don't think it's actually applying the effect. I think it's just stuck there. Bit of a bug. But basically, yeah, I've got ones that increase my chance to find catalysts on the prophecies and wands. So there's a higher chance when I've got these in. There's a higher chance that the prophecies that appear will be giving me the reward of either a catalyst or a wand. So you can see there, exalted wands, straight up. And then this one, condition, corruption, we'll go into that in a bit, but Death of Shade of Oribus, with the condition is the monolith, but it needs 150 corruption, and you get 4 exalted wands. So again, you kind of see, you can sort of chase items that you want. And I'll just quickly show you the armor one. In here, I just have the chance for it to be exalted. So 30% chance. Well, according to theory, that's a 30% extra chance that the prophecies that appear on here will offer me exalted items. And you can see straight away there, exalted helmet, exalted boots. Yeah, exalted boots. So I'll just take this one. I'll quickly look at what that one is. But yeah, I'll just choose this one. Bam, new prophecy acquired. And if you hit Y, that brings up your screen with like your item faction. And I can click over here and I can see all the prophecies that I've got going. And then as I complete those prophecies, I'll get the reward and they'll disappear from here. So it's pretty cool. The rewards are very cool. And this really helps. Like if you are just playing solo and fairly casually and you're not like min-maxing and absolutely blasting and trying to get super, super far into the monolith and the corruption, because you can infinitely raise corruption. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But yeah, basically it's a pretty cool system. I quite like it. It's an interesting idea the way they've done this with like either, you know, doing the merchant faction stuff or the Circle of Fortune stuff. I will definitely try the Merchant's Guild stuff eventually, but with this character I just wanted to play by myself and kind of see what I could do, see how far I could get just doing my own build and mucking around and everything. And yeah, we'll talk about my build now. And this is actually another element that I really, really like. It's another really cool thing about this game, basically. But basically, I played as an acolyte. Got my skills here, and you've got your passives. P to bring up your passives, S to bring up your skills. But pretty much, I started as an acolyte, just wanted a lot of damage, and then after a certain point, you get to the end of time, and you can choose a mastery. I chose Warlock. That means I get the full tree, but if you like to, you can also choose some points in the other masteries. You just can't go past this chain. And yeah, it's been really, really fun. I've had a lot of fun. Sitting at level 95 right now. I believe 100 is the level cap. I'll show you like my gear and stats and stuff, and just kind of talk about what I've been thinking. I used a lot of like damage over time, spell damage, fire damage, and necrotic damage. They were my big damage types. Now I'm shifting more to damage over time, as you can kind of see, and necrotic damage especially, because I'm using Soul Feast a lot more. We'll go into that in a minute, but basically the gear, I just started doing all of that, but I'll just quickly go through what I've got. Now I'm trying to apply Damned on hit a lot more too. That's a damage over time debuff that I can do on enemies. So I've got damage over time stuff, damage over time. Yeah, just some nice rings, some nice bits. I will go a bit more in depth with this soon. And then I've just got idols, like I said, filling in some gaps. And then the blessings, again, I've got like some pretty cool ones now. Some drop rate ones, some, nice stat ones. That one's pretty handy. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But yeah, you start to get some really cool ones later on. So basically the flow of my character, right? Pretty much what I will do is just lay down a Chthonic Fissure. And then that would basically be, and this is the map system, by the way, like the Monolith. But basically I put down a fissure, I can cast Infernal Shade, and then do some shades, and you can see how they're triggering and exploding and doing some big AoE damage. But that's pretty much the gist of that part. And then if I really need to dish out pain, I can just do Soul Feast. And then on top of that, like say I come across like a big bunch of enemies, I could just click R, do my my Profane Veil, and that hides me, gives me some ward. But this is pretty much what my character does, and I just blast that. And yeah, that's basically that. Just come through here. I'll probably show some other footage too, but go back to town now. But pretty much the skills, right? So basically what I do is I've got it set up through my skills and the ones I'm using here, basically you can specialize in different skills, and as you level up the passive tree, you unlock the like different class skills, basically, like the mastery skills, and you can see these ones here on that. And I was doing Warlock, and then you can see the skills I've specialized in. Now you can respec. You can respec 1 point, and then you have to level that up again. It's really quick at the end game. I haven't really done much of that, but you can also entirely despecialize the skill, and then depending what level you sort of are, that minimum specialized level is basically when you despecialize and put another skill in. See how that says 10? The skill that I put in will start at level 10, and then I just have to level it up from 10 rather than 0 like it would be at the start of the game. But yeah, my skills. So basically using Chthonic Fissure, Infernal Shade, Soul Feast, Transplant, and Profane Veil. Chthonic Fissure, I've basically got it set up to like shred Necrotic Res and Fire Res, and this is the one that's quite interesting. Basically when spirits torment an enemy, which is when you do a fissure, you see little spirits come flying out and they inflict torment, which is a curse. But basically when they do that, this allows them to instantly trigger Infernal Shade to do its remaining damage, which is really cool. I've got some other stuff over here, which is just, letting them spread Ignite and stuff. This one's interesting. It does like an acid skin thing on them, which then makes them more likely to suffer a critical hit from me, so I have higher crit chance against them. Just some damage and stuff. Again, just maximum target stuff for Ignite. And then, yeah, this is really cool. This is basically more chance to inflict torment. This one's really neat. Spirits inflict damned. So again, just trying to stack damned, and this one's really, really powerful. It deals more damage per 2% uncapped necrotic res, so it's just damage buffing. It's part of why my necrotic res, I tried to get it really high. I had it way higher earlier. But basically, that's Chthonic Fissure. And then Infernal Shade, I have it set up basically to do like big AoE, big Ignite chance, some fire penetration with Ignite, and this is the important stuff down here. Basically more damage, reduced duration, explodes at the end, which is that big explosion you see, and then this is just adding the area and damage to the explosion. So then basically every time a spirit, so when I do that and I've got someone shaded, every time one of those little spirits hits an enemy that's got an Infernal Shade on them, that can trigger an explosion. And then Soul Feast, this is set up as like a damage thing. I'll probably play around with this more. It's not entirely optimized, but basically this lets me have 3 stacks of it ready to go. More mana efficiency, more targets that it can hit. Damned chance per intelligence. Trying to keep my intelligence around 50, so I basically have like 100% chance to do it. And then necrotic penetration for damned that's inflicted by Soul Feast. But I also have necrotic, shred. And then with it as well, which can, just a handy little extra thing, because it can increase damage taken by like the curse that those guys inflict. And this thing can just absolutely destroy, because I've got the damned on chance to hit as well from all this. Basically I can just stack up just tons of damned on enemies, and hopefully over time I'll shift it to be even more powerful, because I'm shifting away a little bit from this kind of combo and then just focusing more on this, because it can just do a ton of damage really quickly. As far as survivability and stuff, Transplant, I've basically got this set up to give me haste, which is really, really handy. A couple other little, whatever bonuses there. And then that is pretty good, because this was basically converted to necrotic, and then fear enemies on departure, and then fear enemies on arrival, basically just to make them kind of run away from me if I'm using it to try and get away. And then the haste is really handy, because often you want to be moving pretty quickly around the place, so it's really nice to be able to just go like that, get haste and move quicker. The other important side of it, the way I've got it set up, is basically lowering the health cost, but then this is the important part, basically setting it up to give me bone armor, which is basically a buff that gives me armor and less damage taken, and then I'm just increasing the armor effect and the duration, so that's just giving me more survival. And then I've got Profane Veil, basically just set up to do some big fire damage again, because this is basically set up so that it can 100% chance to put a Infernal Shade on an enemy when I first damage them. So that combos again really well with how I've got those set up, because inflict Infernal Shade, Chthonic Fissure, it hits it, it explodes, and then over here is basically just setting it up to spread damned, to spread damned when I inflict Mark of Death. So, and this is basically, it applies Mark of Death to enemies, gives it to myself, but it applies it to them, but then it spreads the stacks of damned that I've got from all this other stuff going on to other enemies, and then that's the number of spreads, so it can spread to 4 other enemies. And that's just another handy one too, because it can cleanse negative ailments that I have on myself. And that's the skills. And then the passives, basically I just kind of like went along, ended up needing some more like mana regen and stuff, so I've kind of tweaked this as needed. There's a lot of them that are good if you get them to like 5, because they'll give you a cool bonus. So it's like less damage taken per curse on target. Usually I'm inflicting 1 or 2 curses at least. More damage over time to cursed. This is a nice mana regen-y one. More mana per intelligence, that's good. Ward decay threshold per 1% necrotic res, that's straight up quite nice. That's just flat stat bonuses. These ones are start to get quite powerful. Damned Overload and Ignite Overload, I triggered those quite a bit. Now, not as much, but basically it's like just giving me more damage and more ways to do damage, and triggers more things like Flame Whip triggers, which is like just whips enemies with fire. This one chains them to the ground basically. It all happens really quick, but it's good. And then Witchfire is like another thing that can trigger. And Witchfire, again, it's just stacking more damage basically. So yeah. And then yeah, it's just it's all pretty cool. And then this one just giving me some more cast speed for curses. But the main one that I wanted was just the like if I reach low health, it cleanses all curses and gives me ward. So that's quite nice. Because it basically means that if I end up in a sticky situation, most of the time I've got enemies cursed, so then it'll go trigger that, and then I've got a little bit more survivability, which is just nice. And then yeah, just some more damage over time stuff. This one I like because it's just, again, chance for haste, increased haste effect, which you kind of want some speed. Like it's good to move fast in this game basically. And then yeah, that's some health leech. Don't know why I've got that so high. I think it was just what I put points in to unlock the next thing. And it is handy to have some like health leech. And again, it's bonus against cursed. So yeah, and that's just kind of all of that stuff. Endgame, this was pretty much where I started having to adjust a little bit. I may as well talk about kind of my endgame stats. But there's basically endgame, there's like the monolith, there's dungeons and stuff. But pretty much because we're talking about my character and my build, some endgame things that I kind of noticed and started having to adjust was basically shifting from less offensive affixes to kind of a better combination of offensive and defensive, especially with like crit avoidance or reduced critical strike damage. I love these boots because these straight up give me like 89% reduced bonus damage taken from crits, which is pretty insane. And they've got big movement speed on them. And giving me health and intelligence. So they're one of my favorite items I've found, I think. That critical strike avoidance is something I got recently because I just swapped out a blessing that was a bad, like random bad blessing that I had. And then now I've got that, which will be helpful because eventually it'll mean like I can have the option to like try and go for like 100% critical strike avoidance or just keep my current like reductions to the critical strike damage, because at the moment I've also got this one, so that's going over 100% reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes, because you can see this one down the bottom there, 95 armor, 33% reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes. So yeah, that was kind of what I noticed. I also noticed that usually you want to kind of have your resistances at least at the 75% cap, especially like physical and void. They seem to be two big ones, maybe necrotic as well. The elemental ones a little bit, but they don't seem quite as important as like physical and void. Particularly physical, I think that's kind of the main one. The other nice thing is having them at like over 100 usually feels pretty good, because there are some debuffs and stuff and shreds and stuff that will lower your resistances, so it can be nice to have that little bit of extra to help you out when that happens. I also noticed that I wanted to start having more health affixes, so things like 106 to health. You can see that's got health on it. I've kind of switched away a little bit more from that now. You can see that's got 109% health on it, 110 health, but I did have a nice combination of and that one's got like 31% health for increased health, and I've got a lot of increased health ones on here, like 4% increased health, 3% increased health, 2% increased health. So yeah, you can kind of see again that combination of like idols and gear and blessings and stuff, but yeah, having a bigger health pool was more important. Now that I'm switching to damned and stuff a bit, I'm kind of like re-getting into that, but you can see like this was one of the pieces of gear I was using for ages, 23% increased health, which is, it's quite important to at least have like a big health pool. I was trying to aim for like 2k, but now I've also got a bit more ward going. Part of it is just because then if you take a big hit, you've got a bigger health pool to survive the big hit. Ward was the other one. Getting ward and ways to generate ward is quite good. Endurance as well. Endurance is like the threshold where damage dealt to you basically you take less damage for damage below your endurance threshold, and that's the reduction of how much. So I take 32% less damage when I'm below 333 health. Although this character is not really built around endurance, but it is just another really handy one to have, because you can build around having your endurance threshold really high and your endurance really high as well. And they're kind of the stats that were quite needed. Ward, especially with this character, I basically got it set up so I'm generating a lot of ward. I did have it kind of set up so I was getting more ward on kill when I was wearing like this big armor. But now I'm kind of building around just generating it per second and relying on this to get me ward when enemies die. So it's all quite interesting trying to balance all that out. And that's kind of what I've done with that. Okay, so the dungeons and the monolith. The monolith is basically an endgame system. It's kind of like mapping in Path of Exile. You basically choose a timeline, like these are the different timelines, and then you run through different maps, and then you'll have like an objective on the map. So I'll just choose this. Basically, you've got different maps, different map nodes, and they've got different rewards they can give you. Like in this case, it's glyphs. That one's like an experience tomes. You can see, that one's runes, experience tome. You've got relics, amulet, rings, different things, currency. But basically you select one, there's a glyph one. So you just like select one, click start, and then you pretty much run through and you'll have an objective, and it wants me to slay both patrolling diamond matrons. So you just run in, kill some stuff, and you've got your stability bar. Basically you can kill enemies and fill that bar like by killing most of the enemies on the map, and then that gives bonus timeline stability, and timeline stability is pretty much what you need to raise up so you can do different quests and fight the endgame boss. In the empowered timelines, the quests are basically optional and you can just fight the boss. So yeah, we'll just quickly smash this out. Cool. Now I'll just go kill the other one real quick. Cool. And now Echo conquered. And then basically you can just teleport out, or as I said, you can stay and you can build up the bonus stability for the timeline. But yeah, you come out the Echo portal, you get the reward from here, and then every time you'll also get like a chest that you can open. And then, and I got some unique boots, so I'll put them in my stash. Boom, boom. I've filled up my stash again. That's all right. But yeah, so that's basically like a map. And then on here, you've got, if I click on this, you can see you've got your timeline stability. And these are the quests, and then you need that much to unlock the boss. So you need 850, and then you can fight that boss. And that's like the timeline boss. And then basically when you fight the timeline boss, when you defeat them, you get a blessing. I'll probably bring some footage of that up now.
My magic has no equal. Why you run? It is hopeless.
And then those are those powerful blessings that I was showing you before, which is basically like this sort of stuff. Some of them are really, really good. Some of them are just like drop rates for different things. But yeah, some of them are really, really cool and will really, really complement your build. To unlock the empowered monolith has like, it's harder. The bosses and everything's harder. Your area level is higher. because you can see these areas have like a default area level on the left, and then on the right it's all 100. Basically you unlock empowered timelines by completing these 3 level 90 areas, and you go into this middle bit here and click a thing and it empowers the monolith, and then you can do empowered timelines, and then they're all area level 100, and they start with 100 corruption. So the rewards are better, but it's harder, and you can basically get the grand blessings from doing the empowered timelines. And then once you kind of want to, you can just infinitely farm the timelines and push corruption higher and higher on a certain timeline. You'll come across, I can't really see one anywhere here, but basically you'll come across these nodes where you fight like a little boss guy, and then you pretty much level up the corruption of the timeline, and you can just do that infinitely and just keep going further and further out in the nodes and doing it more and more, and you just get better and better rewards, and it gets harder and harder and harder and harder. And that's kind of the infinite farm on the monolith timeline. So the game also has some dungeons and arenas. I'll be bringing up footage of this while I'm talking about it, but basically higher tiers of the dungeons will offer better rewards and give you access to more powerful things basically. But overall, to be honest, I found the dungeons a little bit lackluster. I haven't really touched them too much. Each one kind of has its own mechanic, which is pretty cool, but apart from the Temporal Sanctum, which is the one that gives you the chance to, that's the one where you get to combine a unique and a exalted item into a legendary, so that's a really nice reward. But apart from that, the other dungeons rewards just didn't really seem worth the trouble. The Lightless Arbor dungeon, you fight through some mobs while basically staying in the light, and you have a little pyre amber light thing that you need to keep lit, because outside of the light everything's really powerful and nasty, and you can kind of send that light nearby to you or just call it back to you and have it floating along with you. And if you take damage that drains the light, then you can recharge the light by slaying amber elementals. And then at the end of the dungeon you fight the Mountain Beneath, which is like a big boss guy. The fight's pretty basic, and you just destroy a couple of, like, I don't know, you burn some things, like a couple of little things, not a lot going on. It was pretty basic, not very compelling. And then the reward from the dungeon, it's like an interesting idea for a gold sink. And then the reward from the dungeon is basically a gold sink. It's an interesting idea for a gold sink. You basically spend gold to choose different loot options that will spawn inside a vault that you get to basically open after you've done this. But I think the problem is that honestly, it's just better to spend your gold on stash tabs. Then there's also the Soulfire Bastion. That's okay. You basically swap between necrotic and fire immunity in that dungeon to avoid these environmental hazards that are spread throughout. And then you spend a Soul Ember each time you switch. And Soul Embers are basically the currency that you earn in the dungeon by slaying enemies. And then at the end of the dungeon, once you've defeated the boss, you get to gamble those embers. The Temporal Sanctum, this one's kind of cool. As I mentioned, easily the best reward, but basically you swap between timelines to navigate your way through the dungeon, and then in one timeline there might be like a doorway that's blocked, but then if you switch to the other timeline, that doorway might not be blocked. And then during the boss fight, you can switch timelines to avoid some of the nasty attacks that the boss does. Overall, it's pretty cool and thematic mechanic. Given the story of the game is about, all this timey-wimey stuff, it is quite thematic, and it does fit with what's going on. And the reward, as I said, for completing the Temporal Sanctum is just by far the best, because you get to use the Eternity Cache to combine a unique item and an exalted item. There's also an arena. You fight waves of enemies. They get tougher and tougher. After every 5 waves, you get some loot, and then you can either abandon the run or you can continue. And then after every 10 waves, you choose a buff that the enemy will receive. And then the most powerful buff will kind of like reward you with better loot if you defeat the arena champion, which is wave 40, I believe. But then if you choose the weaker buff, you get less rewards, but the enemies in the arena champion aren't as buffed. It's kind of neat because you're trying to balance out like the risk versus reward as you go, and you're trying not to buff the enemies too much, because it's quite possible to make the arena champion like really powerful. There's also a endless arena. I haven't actually played it, but in the endless arena, the waves just keep coming infinitely until you die, and I think there's one arena champion that comes at wave 90. Yeah, so that's basically the endgame systems. As far as like builds that can just slaughter the endgame stuff, I mean, my build, as I've mentioned, it did pretty well. I've cleared what I consider to be basically the majority of content in the game. The thing is, though, that there's probably a point where with the corruption and everything, if I kept pushing, my character would probably fall flat. There are definitely some crazy builds out there that won't. There's crazy things you can do with ward, and some of them seem super good. You can definitely min-max the game and just come up with absolutely uber builds that will just destroy. But what I really love about this game is that I was able to just come up with a build on the fly as I was playing, and then with a little bit of willingness to kind of adjust my gear as needed, I was able to just enjoy the whole game. And now all I have left really is that infinite monolith corruption and maybe a little bit of dungeoning. But yeah, if I choose to kind of engage with that, or I can try some other builds and stuff, because at this point on this character, I've cleared all the empowered monolith timelines at that base 100 corruption. So I really do just have to either push the corruption higher, do some dungeons, or play some other builds. And I think that's the thing. I probably could easily see myself just playing around with this build more, kind of specializing more, or just playing some other builds and playing some of the other characters, and all of that sounds really fun to me. And I really have had so much fun with this game. And there's just so much more fun to be had, and so many more classes and builds and stuff to try. But I think I've basically finished the bulk of the game. But yeah, so I'm having a lot of fun with Last Epoch. And there are just a lot of features that I really like. I love that they've all kind of been straightforward and easy to understand features, and that there is a lot of really nice quality of life features in the game. So that's my big long-winded talking about Last Epoch and the systems in Last Epoch, and just, I've enjoyed it all. I've loved a lot of it, and I've probably given you guys like an overview of what the game has to offer. But yeah, let me know what you think of Last Epoch down in the comments. Let me know what builds you're doing, all of that. It all sounds pretty cool to me. So yeah, thanks for watching. Have a good day or night, whichever it may be, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.